Well, to discuss that story a bit further, we're now joined by Mr. Dennis Halliday, who is the former UN Assistant Secretary General, who's joining us now on the line from New York. Sir, thanks a lot for joining us now. How do we come to terms with the fact that the United States has called for dialogue and yet brings in these sanctions?
Well, it sends, in my view, very, very confused signals to the people of Iran. You know that I spent time in Iraq overseeing the oil for food program under sanctions. So I'm very much familiar with the consequences of sanctions on the people of Iraq and those of the lower income group. In Iraq, of course, that was comprehensive. In Iran, the Americans will tell us these are smart sanctions. And smart sanctions target trade, banking, finance, the government itself. But the reality is, I believe, in the case of Iran, that the food prices, very basic needs, the price of drugs and pharmaceuticals have gone up, together with other needs of rural and urban people. So I'm totally opposed to sanctions of any sort on any country, anywhere. And now that the United States, under Kerry, the new Secretary of State, and hopefully Mr. Hagel, who will be the new Secretary for War, that they will begin to have these talks with Iran, which is the only common sense way to go. And to do this pressure tactic at this moment makes no sense to me. It's a typical confused output from Washington, in my view.
So, Mr. Halliday, going into these talks that that Mr. Biden has spoken about, Vice President Biden spoke about, and even the Iranian foreign minister said he was encouraged by the talk of Mr. Biden. Why would the Iranian government even go into these talks when these harsh sanctions are being put on it? What kind of a scenario, what kind of an atmosphere does that create?
It's completely unhelpful. But, the Americans have this very odd concept of, I think they call it carrot and stick approach, meaning they offer you something at the same time they hit you over the head with a stick. And that's exactly what they're offering, I guess, right now. It makes no sense to me. And they forget, of course, that Iran is an ancient country, a sovereign state, and there's no way that the government and the people of Iran need to accept this weird approach from the United States.
All right, so then going forward, then what prospects do exist for successive talks in real-world terms?
Well, regardless of the confusion of American policy, sanctions, or other things like that, I would recommend, of course, to Iran that any opportunity to talk is better than none. And once the dialogue begins with reasonable people, hopefully from Washington, then I think you can begin to see ways that you can live with each other and convince the Americans that they're not under threat of nuclear weapons, which of course is their fear given the media and propaganda they've faced for the last several years.
And then, of course, Mr. Halliday, I also wanted to ask, what does this do then for the U.S. relationship with the likes of Russia and China, considering those countries have stood by Iran throughout these sanctions? Well,
sadly, relations with Russia and China are both in a sad state of affairs. The Russian relationship is somewhat damaged, and they're now organizing military activity in the Pacific, which again is threatening China because the Americans are afraid that China is becoming a significant military power, which in the reality of the Pentagon budget, of course, is really not, makes no sense.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now. That was Mr. Dennis Halliday, former UN Assistant Secretary General, speaking to us live on the line from New York. Sir, as always, we do appreciate your insight here on Press TV.